everyone. I'm here to talk to you about essay conclusions. Everything that I'm going to say in this video is going to be applied to the response essay and also to essay 4 and essay 5, which are coming up. And actually could even be applied to memoir conclusions if we're looking back to an assignment we've already done. And then looking forward, I've mentioned essay 4 and essay 5, but I forgot to mention your portfolio cover letter. So conclusions are a really important part of the essay because it's sort of your last chance to connect with your reader. And you'll see me looking down. I have the textbook open, our Patterns for Writing textbook, open to pages 60 and 61. I know that a few of the sections I'm teaching have looked at these pages specifically, and I've referred all of the sections to these readings, so they kind of give you some general guidelines about ways that conclusions take their shape. But what I want to talk to you about today is the way that the introduction and the conclusion work together. In creative writing, you will often hear people say that the beginning actually has parts of the end already present in it. And I only mention that because it's true for essay writing, it's true for academic essay writing as well. However you start, the conclusion has to mimic that, or you've heard me say in class, echo that, or in some way reflect what was happening in the beginning, so that not only is the essay sort of framed by the introduction and the conclusion, but also your reason for writing is expressed, and then there's some sort of sense in the conclusion that you've come to a new understanding. You can reflect on what your new thinking is in comparison to the old thinking, assuming that in the introduction you introduce ideas that are sort of a starting point for you, an old way of thinking, an initial look at something, and so the end kind of reflects how you have changed your thinking about a topic. So think about this in relation to the response essay, that you start out by summarizing a source that I've asked you to examine closely, to express whatever opinion you want about it. You start by summarizing, you start by saying, hey, these are the things I'm going to be looking at and the reason why I want to be looking at those things. And then through the body, you examine all of those things very closely. So in the end, you should come to I'm going to say it again, some changed sense of what all of this examination means. What does it mean for you as a writer? What does it mean for people reading a text in general? So I'll just kind of remind you again, pages 60 and 61 give you some really good ideas. But what I want to do instead is turn to David Kirby's Inkwell. So I'm looking down so that I can find the page numbers. 692 is where we have his introduction. Remember, we've looked at this many times in class. We've read it together. We've talked about it. And we've even outlined it. You'll remember we had on the board boxes that outlined the sections of Kirby's essay. So let's recall what the introduction in Kirby's essay does. It talks about, in paragraph 1, the thesis statement telling us what he's writing about and why. He's writing about tattoos, and he's writing about it because he wants to explore the problem that he has in reading them and understanding what they mean. They're easier to read sometimes on some people than they are on other people, and so this is his whole objective. His whole purpose is to figure out, so what can he learn from them, these tattoos, if he looks at them more closely and reads them and learns to read them, because this is the problem he has. He says he doesn't know how to read them. Then he gives us the example of the guy with the tattoo on his feet, the one who's caught stealing car parts. And then, and that was paragraph 2. And then in paragraph 3, he gives us a sort of a combination of looking at that example with the guy who's stolen car parts, and then sitting that next to a source, a secondary source, where we're starting to get the beginnings of his analysis of how tattoos have how tattoos have been used by people over time in various cultures. Okay, And then I'm going to stop there because we know that the next section is all secondary sources. He gives the history of tattoos all the way over to page 694. So I'm going to stop at this point because I'm getting into the body, but we remember the body. He does the history. He has that transition section, and then he gives all the examples of the people he's interviewed where he's learning about the different meanings. When we finally get to the conclusion, which starts on page 696, this is where he has a change. So remember, I've stressed this in my video so far. He talks about his realization that this is all self-expression, and that it's not just categorization of people by socioeconomic status or classification of people by ethnicity or groupings of people. He realizes it's about expressing that individual self. And then we see as he moves in, so that's the beginning of paragraph 21. We see as he moves into 21 and into 22, paragraph 22, that he's reminding us of things he said earlier in the piece, but also sitting that next to his changed awareness of what all of this means. So the best conclusions are going to restate your thesis. They are going to emphasize what your purpose for writing is. But you heard me say in class, conclusions have to do something more. They have to say something else other than just what you started with. You have to express that change, a change in attitude, a change in awareness, a change, even if you're going into the direction of here's the way we could have solved this problem. So there has to be this move towards expressing how you have changed as a thinker, and you're expressing that in the writing in your conclusion. So that's really all I need to say about conclusions, because that's how they work and that's how they're most effective. And so think about that as you're doing your conclusion for the response essay and any future essay that we still have to write for this course, that the conclusion cannot just say, hey guys, I already said all this stuff and I'm repeating it. Because if all you're doing is repeating what you started with, the conclusion is not going to be effective enough. Okay? So hopefully that gives you a sense of conclusions and how you can think about them moving forward in this class and actually any course that you have where you're assigned something to write. Have a good one, guys.